You know, Final Fantasy Strangers of Paradise has to be one of the most mixed experiences that I've had with a game in a while. I think to start out, what do I think of Final Fantasy Origins? It's really weird. There's, for one, the starting cinematic is really cool. It's very immersive. It gets you wrapped right into immediately the world of, this is a prequel, I believe, to Final Fantasy 1. And dude, the starting cutscene is so cool. The circumstances that sets up, how gritty it is. It's very dark fantasy in some elements. You have this knight that you see, who is Jack Garland, of course, but you have this knight who's just taking away the smoking hot princess. And by the way, freaking Princess Sarah has to be one of the hot, if not the hottest chick in all of gaming. Like, almost, I think she outmatches freaking Tifa. I mean, this chick is a smoke show, bro. I don't know. She has to be the best woman in all of gaming. I'm gonna be honest. There has to be a special note made in this review about how freaking hot. And by the way, I totally get it, Jack. I get why you're freaking abducting this chick from our freaking castle. But you know, it's very difficult because, okay, before we get into that, let's not forget to make this point. Special notice of just the fact of how hot Princess Sarah is. Definitely has to be one of the hottest chicks in gaming. You think about a lot of the hottest chicks in gaming. There's a ton of them. Well, there used to be a ton of them, right? Nowadays, we all have some sort of competition for the ugliest woman in all of gaming, right? When you look at Final Fantasy Origins, there's no doubt in my mind that this game was probably being made all the way back in somewhere around 2010, 2008. I don't know where any information of their development cycle was, but there's no doubt that Final Fantasy Origins was made somewhere before everything went super woke. All the content that we see now, all this woke BS, this game is, if there's any wokeness, there's tad bits of wokeness in Final Fantasy Origins, a little bit of egalitarian bullcrap, equating women to men in certain ways of their potential or whatever. Like the Sophia chick, she's basically back in 2010, she's your liberal feminist studies professor. That's basically what her character is. And there's a certain thing that got me freaking pissed off, that her and Neon, they both talk about how, right, Princess Sarah being offered up to a man like Jack, for instance, a man who earns upon himself a woman of his selection, right, because he's the hero, right, and he saves the realm and he gets to have a selection of a beautiful woman, that being Sarah, and they're like, oh, I would hate to be a woman that's just offered up to a man. And it's literally just a statement made against chivalry. It is absolute bull crap. It's like a man earning a man of esteem. He merits his esteem, right? So he's a meritorious man, earning upon himself a woman of his selection, of his choosing. And, right, she comes from a good family, she's beautiful, the whole 9 yards. Okay, something being wrong about that, something being twisted and bent backwards about that, about a woman of desire for a man of merit. That's chivalry. What this game does is that it demonizes, at a certain point in the game, chivalry. And it's like, go screw yourselves, you developers. Because, and we have this whole conversation in my playthrough about this, like, for one, screw your idea about, like, whatever idea you have about women having their own autonomy or their own kind of free will, because there's a bunch of errors and issues with that. There's nothing wrong, right, with a man having authority over a woman and a man earning upon himself a woman of his choosing. Absolutely zero wrong with that. That's how generations have worked for the longest time. That is how men and women have operated for the longest time. And by the way, that created the strongest and the most stable of families and just relationships all throughout history. Men ultimately having authority, and of course them earning upon themselves their nobility in life and whatever else. To think that a guy like Jack, right, bestowing upon himself through his labors a woman like of his choosing, which happens to be Princess Sarah, thinking that is somehow bent backwards and twisted, is just ridiculous. I can't even believe that this game makes a position like that. But it's just little small things like that you see in this game that are the small elements of wokeness that we saw back then, right? The amount of little egalitarianism, the subtle propaganda that we were being bombarded with, but it's not overwhelming. The majority of the story, right? The majority is very traditional in a lot of elements of its narrative, its characters, its themes. You have a character like Ash, right? And he's this black guy, and he's obviously thrown in for forced diversity, right? ESG, but he's not annoying. And so again, this game screams like the UI. When you look at the UI of this game, when you look at kind of like the way that the combat's designed and different elements, you can just tell this is 2010 era. The women are attractive. You know, Sophia, who's basically a feminist in this game, she's freaking hot, bro. She's got a nice rack. She doesn't seem to be like super young or anything, but for her age, I mean, she's hot. So it's like, it's so clear that this was made during a time, right, where we knew everything not to be woke, not overwhelmingly woke, right? And they mostly make everything kind of traditional, as maybe you could call it. In the Neon, she's also attractive, and they kind of try to pull a little bit of girl boss with her at the start, but then they completely back away from that, and they really just double down on Jack being the main star of this show. And with Final Fantasy Origins, that's really who the star of the show is. It's Jack, you know? This guy, for one, Jack's character, love his character. There are a bunch of criticisms I have as I was playing this game for all the writing, right? And there's a bunch of ways that they wrote that was a little bit silly, maybe a little bit ridiculous at times. And again, I've made my criticisms. There's slight little elements of wokeness. Again, they force a character like Ash, who's black, and it's like, okay, clearly this is not a world where you have like really any black people. This is quite clearly an Anglo-Saxon culture, an Anglo-Saxon story, and this is something that's so annoying in modern media, is where, right, if we have a Japanese game, there's no issue with everyone being Japanese. If we have a game about a bunch of Egyptian people, Middle Eastern people, go down the list of all the races, there's no problem. No one's complaining when you just don't see any white people in a non-white person story. But then when we get white people stories, bro, we always have to force in black people. We always have to force in all these different people of different races. For some reason, you can't just have white people in a white people story. And that's a whole separate conversation. Like, obviously, they have their political reasons for this, but it doesn't matter. That is annoying. A character like Ash didn't need to be in this game. The redeeming factor about Ash's character, though, as I said before, he's not annoying. So, okay, fine. He's not annoying. He's not a detriment, and he's not a degenerate character. So, for the most part, you know, I liked Ash's character, and even though there are woke elements with his character, it wasn't completely unforgivable. Just making that statement there. Jack, though, is the absolute saving grace of this. The only reason this story exists is because of Jack. There's no reason why this story exists other than the fact that Jack is the character. He is funny throughout the game. They pull certain jokes with Jack, which are always pretty humorous. I like them. The jokes are funny. They land well, and they set up Jack's character really well as well. How many times can I say well? It does a very efficient job, though, of setting up Jack's character and getting you to know how his character thinks compared to all the other characters. And so, like, it creates this interesting set of personalities. The writers understand how to make different people, for one. Well, to some extent. But of course, really what matters is that they understand how to... They don't just have flat characters. Different characters have slightly different outlooks. And again, that does not excuse any wokeness or subtle propaganda elements thrown in, but you know, you do have characters that just think differently from one another, right? And so that is somewhat an indicator at times of slightly more I'm not trying to gas up these writers here. I'm just saying these writers have slightly more maturity nowadays than we are getting at all in modern storytelling. You even look at Final Fantasy 16. That game sucked. Its story was bad. The writing was bad. The writer was absolutely immature. I mean, it was like a freaking child or some kind of like college graduating, prepubescent college graduate. Some kind of prepubescent college graduate from Reddit or Tumblr that wrote Final Fantasy 16. And they're trying to come across as sophisticated, as wise, as... Oh, there's a reason why this person has a job. No, there's no reason why this person has a job. The writer was absolute dog crap. Whoever wrote this, I think it was a different person. I don't think it was Tetsuya Nomura, even though he did do a lot of the character overall direction of the game. I don't know who the writer was. But anyways, there's some level or element of maturity that they have greater than what they're now hiring. The people they're hiring now, we have a huge issue with quality storytellers nowadays. We have children being hired to write stories. and they don't have the maturity to understand how adults think and how they live in the world. And most people today don't have a good idea of how adults think and how they live in the world. A lot of our society has become children running civilization now. And now we've gotten to the point where we are making philosophies based on childish thoughts and principles. So that bleeds into a game like these, right? Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy Origins. But Final Fantasy Origins, it reeks of a game that's 2010, which means we get a lot of the good qualities. You know, you get some of the rough around the edges elements of a game from that time, but you get some of the good elements too, what games used to be like. And dude, storytelling was so much better back in 2010 era, a little bit before that, before everything went super woke. Again, Jack's character is just a masculine. He's a masculine character, unapologetically masculine. Again, there's things about the characters surrounding him that they're not, Jed, he's not very masculine. I mean, he's kind of like an ambiguously gay guy. I don't know why they did that. Astos, right? He's also ambiguously gay. Again, this has subtle elements of wokeness, right? But this is, again, back in the 2010 era, the wokeness was very subtle. So, you could still imagine Jed being a straight dude, but they made him ambiguously gay. So it's just, take that for what you will, whatever that freaking means. But Jack's character is great in this game, bro. They set him up super well. His dialogue's great. The story feels a little bit silly at times, right? Some of the setup for the story is a little bit silly. But, and by the way, I just gotta give it, bro, he looks masculine, Jack's character looks masculine. He has freaking muscles, he's ripped, and he's stoic. He's unapologetic about his masculinity. And he doesn't sit there, get wrapped up in his emotions, other people's emotions. And again, I do like the characters that surround him. It's just that they, it's so strange because the characters that surround him, there's just certain elements, pitfalls with their characterizations, but ultimately, they're very good, side characters for Jack. And I'm gonna be honest, at the end of the game, there's a great freaking payoff to these characters that you meet at the beginning of the game and throughout the game, the people that Jack kind of makes as his friends. There is such a great delivery and execution on all the investments that you make throughout this journey of the game. When this game, okay, and this is the other thing, I think this game definitely probably went through development hell. I don't know if there's information out there that says that this game was in development hell. It's very clear that this game, right, very different. It starts off very different from where it continues to where it ends. You can tell that they had a different story in mind starting the game. Then they continued the game and they started to pivot very quickly. And I'm pretty sure they had 3 different design philosophies throughout the development of this game. At the beginning, they had a certain idea, because there's this they set up these pirates that don't mean anything later on. Then they go into when you fight Neon, and for some reason she's Jack Garland, and you defeat her, and now you disavow her of the Jack Garland spirit, demon spirit, whatever the heck it is, and you free her from that vessel. I don't know why it is that way, whatever, it's that way for some reason. And they try to go a little bit girl boss with her, but then very quickly they just kind of back off from that, and then her character really is just a blatant side character after you fight her. And after that, the story goes in a random different direction, and it kind of seems like maybe they're just kind of adding fluff to the story a little bit there, but they throw in different characters, different bosses, and there's not actually that is the part of the game where they try to, with Astos, they kind of try to develop him. It looks like they're trying to set him up to be a villain, right? Kind of like a Luciferian maybe character, right? A Faustian character. And then they completely go back on that. And then literally, I think it's after things happen with Princess Sarah, right, towards the middle ending of the game. That is around the time that they just completely shift a lot of the characterizations of the characters. The entire direction and the beat of the story changes. And it's around that time that they change Astos' character from what you thought he was going to be, and then he just completely turns into somebody else. His story, he suddenly has a backstory. He didn't have a backstory with Jack, now he does. So again, it just seems, it's very clear that they just didn't have one singular idea as they were making this game. And so there's a bunch of criticisms I have for the story, because, and by the way, again, the women in this game are just attractive, right? There's no apologies for attractive women. Dude, the freaking queen to the king in this game, she's hot. Especially for a freaking queen. I don't know how old she is. Doesn't really matter. For whatever, she's hot. Okay, she's just a hot queen. And it's just all the women are attractive. And this is something that we sorely lack nowadays. It's just attractive women. And you look at the men, and of course they're freaking, they're brutes of mankind, which is great. But, it's just unapologetic masculinity and femininity. And again, they pull their little wokeness bullcrap here and there. They sometimes try to slightly equate women to men. That kind of bullcrap, it happens here and there. But overwhelmingly, bro, there's just so many things that they do well. And again, as I was saying, the design philosophy definitely seemed to change many times throughout the game's story, throughout all of its story beats, the mood of the game, right? As I said, I think there are 3 directions in this game. The mood changes within the beginning, the middle, and the end. And it does not seem very clear that it's one person that made this game, or was directing this game. So whatever happened with the development of this game, it came out great. Yeah, Queen Jane. She's, for however old her character is, she's hot for... I don't need to go down it. That's a separate conversation. But it's so interesting just what this story is. And when I played through it, I had all these criticisms about some portions of the writing, right? Certain executions of the characters, and specifically there are certain, woke things that I had to criticize throughout it. When we get deeper into the game, oh yeah, and here, right here, by the way, on screen, you're going to be seeing the hottest chick in all of gaming. Holy crap, bro. Princess Sarah, it is just... Jeez Louise, this chick is freaking hot. And by the way, Princess Sarah, again, you gotta give the freaking flowers to the developers. Dang, look at the way she runs. She is so effeminate as a character. It is insane how effeminate she is. Like, this is like... Oh my word, bro. This is just like what femininity is, right? Her character. And this is what such endearing femininity is. She's so girly. She is so, in her own way, cute, innocent. And again, Jack is just perfect. I mean, just her mannerisms, the way that she speaks. Frick, she's hot. Oh my gosh. Her character, she's freaking amazing, bro. Again, she's beautiful. She's effeminate. She's cute. She's effeminately silly. It's not overplayed or anything. She's so lighthearted of a character. I mean, seriously, she is... There's just something so pure about her freaking character. Oh my gosh, bro. Is she perfect for freaking Jack? Golly, this chick's freaking smoking hot. She's perfect though for Jack. And Jack is this stoic, unapologetically masculine character. He's not wrapped up in his emotions. He's not... Oh my gosh, bro. And this gets me wanting to talk about certain other executions of the game. I don't know what it is, but like, there's, again, okay, so I have criticisms for different executions of the characters in this game. Look here, right? The foot tapping, because he's impatient with her speaking. God, dude. I freaking love it. Golly. Again, she's unapologetically feminine, and he's unapologetically masculine. You just look at this exchange right here on screen. It's so good. Like, you don't even need the voice acting. You see the delivery, the body language, the words that they're using, the way that they react and respond to one another. It's so good. The writing that they gave to Jack in this game was executed so well. And yeah, again, there's silly moments, and there's certain, but it doesn't matter. There are just certain executions that they make with Jack's character where, like, I don't know what was going on, but they had a better sense of quality in writing Jack's character. And again, Jack's character is just... And this is why I say this game was made somewhere around around before the 2010 era, because Jack's character, unapologetically masculine. The way that he behaves is masculine. This is this kind of male character, only kind of character you really see around 2010 and before 2010. Nowadays, what do we see? We see twinks. We see men who are apologizing for masculinity now, men who are basically women, and men who think that there's something wrong with masculinity, there's something evil with it, and you have to apologize, or there's some restitution you have to create with masculinity. That is not Jack's character. He's like, I gotta kill chaos, and I'm not gonna stop. He's very discerning, very decisive. He doesn't apologize for anything, and he is held to his convictions. He's a freaking man, bro. And these are the characters we used to get. We don't get them anymore. And I begin to tell you how great this character is. This is a type of character. This guy is a hidden gem in modern gaming. This came out, 2022? He is a hidden gem in gaming because we don't get this crap anymore. We don't get characters like this anymore. Batman, Arthur Morgan. I don't know if I have any criticisms about a character like Arthur Morgan, but from Red Dead Redemption 2, he was a great masculine character overall. Solid Snake from, specifically Metal Gear Solid 5, but I would say probably throughout the entire series. I mean, geez, there's a bunch of unapologetic masculinity and femininity and sexualization of femininity within the Metal Gear Solid games. They're freaking awesome. And Snake is an awesome character because of that. We don't get that anymore. We don't get characters like these anymore. And that's why I say this game, there's no way that this was made recently. There is absolutely every reason to say that this was development hell. And for that one reason, I just got to give so many flowers to this freaking game because it provides to us a value that we are so deprived of nowadays. Again, there are exchanges between Jack, different characters. Whenever characters get too wrapped up in their thoughts and, they're getting way too amped up, they're getting way too anxious about the world and the fact that the world's falling apart and they're trying to fight chaos, but the world's getting worse as they fight chaos. All this crap going on, the whole storyline that's happening. And Jack just sits there and he's like, just shut up. Villains will be having a monologue and they'll be like, you don't understand. The world is the way it is and why I do what I do because of X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. And then he's just like, just shut up, bro. I'm just gonna kill you. You're chaos. Jack's character is it's so weird. He is such a breath of fresh air every moment he speaks. He is such a tonal shift all the time. And he is just unapologetically masculine. And that it's just everything that is so good about his character. Throughout the game, you might sit there and be like, I don't know how the story really feels. But it's every time that Jack talks, he revives the relevance of the story. And as I'm telling you, this story seems to have 3 directors or design decisions or design philosophies throughout its course. So there's a lot of weird kind of, again, Jack is what keeps you playing the story. Jack is what keeps you in the story. The gameplay is pretty fun. We'll get into the gameplay in a moment. But the gameplay definitely keeps you in the game here. There's elements that are very rewarding or just the game is fun. I'm not going to say it's a perfect game. It's not perfect gameplay, but the game's fun. But again, let's just get through the story here. Jack is the character that he redeems the story all throughout. And whenever the game feels really heavy, Jack's character is he's just there to lighten the mood in the truest masculine sense that you can ask for from a character. Their execution of Jack is, for the most part, I'm not saying this is perfect. Not trying to gas anything up that hard, but they do it so well. They do it so competently. You got to give them their flowers, bro. Whoever the heck was writing Jack's character, they did a great job, and he saves this story all throughout. Because here's what happens once you're getting around to the end of the game. There's no story. I'm just gonna tell you outright right now. They set up an interesting story. Again, they change directions many times. So the story goes all over the place. And there's a bunch of things along the way to criticize as you're playing the story. Something weird happens. And this is a strange, right? Those people who sit there and they're like, it gets better once you're 20 hours in, right? Those freaking people, it gets better 20 hours in. Well, guess what with this game, bro? This is the weirdest thing. And I've never really been able to say this about any game. And I've played a lot of games, right? And this is crazy. It gets better around 20 hours in. However fast it is that you actually get through the game, because for me, it just took that long to get towards the end of the story. They didn't write a freaking story for the overwhelming majority of the game. Now, there's a little elements of you playing through the game. There is that psychological impact that you're just spending all this time, investing all this time being around these side characters, right? The people that are in your party, them talking to each other, talking to you. So you're building up this kind of passive relationship. You're building up this passive kind of repertoire or this passive intimacy with those characters. That is happening, but it's not like that really matters, because if you don't have a good story or good game to execute upon, it doesn't mean anything. What do they do here in this game, bro? The way that they execute Jack's character and the way that they execute but okay, let's just finish this one point, by the way, before I get into his the finalizing points here. There's no story throughout the entire game, and what they do is so weird, right? Through the execution of Jack's character, they do something really weird, and that is they revive the story at the end. There starts to be more cutscenes. They start to actually share with you a freaking story again. They start going into depth about characters and like their backstories and like what they're doing and why they're doing what they're doing. Like they actually start fleshing out the world. They start fleshing out what's going on, who's what, why is what. They actually start adding substance to the game and its story. And they actually start to weave a narrative around the a little bit past the middle ending of the game, right? So once you start getting into the beginning of the end of the game, that's where the story starts. And that's why I have to say they probably did something that I've seen some other developers, it seems like they do as well. And that is where I think they have an original idea. The idea doesn't go for that long, so they add a bunch of fluff. That's my idea. So maybe that's why there's some design philosophy changes that I can sort of tell. And maybe it's because they had to go back and add more content. Maybe that's what they did. And by the way, when it comes down to content with this game goes longer than I was expecting. So, if you're concerned about whether or not you're spending a good amount of money for a good amount of content with this game, I'll tell you right now, this game has a good amount of content. I would say it's worth its money for the base game. There's also replayability here. You can make different builds. For the most part, though, let's just be honest. There's really like 1 or 2 builds. Now the builds do change throughout the end game because there's different DLCs, and basically the developers have different ideas like what different end game builds you should have throughout the series of DLCs that you're playing. So when you finish the game, you're gonna have a very different end game build than when you finish final DLC and that end game build that you're gonna have. But even when you're finishing up the last DLC for end game, there is going to be another end game build that you can make that's even better. So like this game's kind of linear with the builds that you can make because like there's not a lot that's viable. There is this kind of like end game build path where it's like, okay, you can make this build and that build's good until you get to this build, and then that build's good until you get to this other build, right? It's that kind of design philosophy with this game. I have some criticisms that I could point out for that, but it's like it's also interesting in its own way, right? Like it is interesting to have a build design philosophy where it's like different builds matter at different points of the difficulty path of a game. There's goods and bads with that, and let's not get into that just yet. We're gonna get back right now though. So the end of the game, right? And that is where is like so clear, bro. They actually had a game when they made the ending. All of a sudden, there's relationships between characters that didn't exist, that suddenly exist. And suddenly, like, there's characters that you're just not invested in. You don't really care. You don't really know why are they in the game? And then suddenly, you see, oh, this is why they're in the game. Oh, this is a story that's going on. Oh, this is the relationship that they have. And suddenly, you start to feel connected to these characters. Suddenly, you start to care about what's going to happen to these characters, or the stakes that's happening in the world of the game between these characters. Suddenly you care. Suddenly you're interested. Suddenly you start to kind of worry for them a little bit. So these developers start to do something where they actually start to execute upon the story. And suddenly you start to become invested, and suddenly you start to have dread, right? Like, oh my gosh, I don't want to see this thing happen to that character. I don't want to see this. And that's hard to do, by the way, especially for me. It's very easy to just sit there and be like, okay, this is a crappy story. But dude, they did it. They did it with this game. Like I started to have endearment for the characters and their circumstances. And there's certain, like in any Final Fantasy game, you will see oftentimes a lot of tragedy, right? And it's with those tragedies that are kind of on the horizon that if a game doesn't execute very well, you don't care. It's like, okay, thank God that character died. With Sophia's character, I really didn't give two flying craps about her, besides the fact that she had a nice rack and that she was moderately attractive. And, Neon's also attractive too, but, Sophia has a nice rack. So I could really take it or leave it, Sophia's character dying. But outside of that, there's a lot of freaking deliveries and executions within the end of this game that gets to you, bro. And like the whole point of storytelling is not emotions, but they do hit the intended emotional notes and impacts that they were setting up for and that they execute at the end of this game. They execute it well, and it gets to you. The emotional cues that they want you to register with, I felt those. And when certain things happen to certain characters, I feel it. And it makes an impact with me. It made an impression, and I was like, holy crap, like, I care about what's going to happen next. I care about what's happening to these direct characters. I'm actually concerned for them. And there's a little bit of dread that I started to feel as I was playing the game. I was like, oh my gosh. Something that happens is that you start to realize you're being taken for a journey, and this kind of like slightly existential, philosophical journey that you're going on suddenly you feel invested. Suddenly you feel like I'm wrapped up in this world. I don't want to see these people go. It actually makes you feel sad that you're going to let go of these relationships once the game's over. And the things that happens to these characters, you feel a little bit of mourning, or what, third party mourning or secondhand mourning for Jack. Again, there's a very explicit way that things happen. It gets to you. You start to have a level of mourning. Even if certain characters haven't necessarily had a certain tragedy occur to them, you still feel dread and you still feel sad when things happen. It's very interesting. Like, it gets you to really feel invested in these characters by the end of the story. Again, the story just picks up at the end. That story actually exists, and they start putting in more cutscenes, and again, things start happening to characters. Certain executions are made that just, it gets you wrapped up in this game's world, and it makes the amount of investment that you start to feel for these characters in its world, man, bro, it gets to you. And it's something that I really did not expect. So that's a story there. And like, if we also talk about some of the ending too, like, it's very bittersweet in a lot of ways. The ending of the game, I have so many things to say about it, and I will put it like this. I start the game off, okay, Jack's funny, I like elements of Jack's character, but I don't really know exactly how I feel about him yet, what I think about him yet. Then you're in the middle of the game, and there's a lot of elements to criticize. You kind of feel like it's dragging itself a little bit. You don't really know like what's going on. Is there even a story? You're like, why am I here? And then we get closer towards the end, and that's when things start to land, and that's when things start to develop. And that's when you start getting invested, as I was speaking about before. Then we get to the ending of the game, and all the executions made there, and how bittersweet it is. I'm going to be honest. I'm just going to say something here. There's not enough about Princess Sarah in the end of this game. And there's not enough about Princess Sarah and her character and the extension of the ending to this game in the DLC. They kind of drop Princess Sarah's character. I don't know what that's about. They stopped involving her. I'm going to be honest, that's a bad move that they made, because I love her character. Her character is absolutely endearing. I mean, there's everything that she's freaking smoking hot, and she is just such an endearing character. I mean, I freaking love her character, bro. I don't think I need to have any more words to describe that. She's just a terrific character that they kind of drop at the end. I don't know why that isn't. Like, they what they should have done is that they should have given Jack and you, the observer, the player, the audience, they should have given you much more payoff between Jack and Sarah. And they don't do that. You know, like, Sarah kind of becomes like a in the back scenes kind of character. And I don't know why they did that. I did not like that whatsoever. So that's one criticism for the ending of the game. But again, when we look at the ending of this game, bro, it's very bittersweet. The story takes you, like, you realize that you're being taken for an emotional roller coaster with this game. And I legit, like, as much as along the way and by the end of the game, I had to criticize a lot. I got to a point at the end of the game where I could legitimately say that there's elements of me loving this game. Like, this game convinced me to love it, to love its story, to love its characters, to love the world that you're set in. And it's so weird. Like, I actually found myself having legitimate love for this game. And that's hard to do. That is something that, again, this is, I without a doubt, this was made back when we had better writers, right, compared to now. But I am amazed to see, with a game like this, that I ended up having just legitimate love for the characters, legitimate love for their journey, right, for their story. And the way that the story changes along the way, and the resolutions that certain characters make because of the entire world that they're set in, the circumstances that are set before them, what they have to put up with, like, right, their struggles and their fears and their concerns, and again, how they resolve those, and all the depth that is added, all the layers, dude, of complexity. This game's not a flat story. There's a lot going on. How the game begins is not how it ends. And for all the goods and bads that comes with how this game ends and how the story ends, I've got to give it to this game, bro. It is insane how this story does a great thing. And this is something a lot of great storytellers know how to do. And that is, you loop in the beginning of a story to the end of the story. And something that they do terrifically well. And I'm going to make a separate point soon here, but something they do terrifically well is that they terrifically connect the beginning of the game to its end. There's a bunch of context that is added into that to the starting cutscene of this game. There's tons of context and a whole bunch of emotional baggage, like good baggage, that's thrown onto you with that starting cutscene of the game, that when you're rewatching it at the end of the game, you're like, oh my gosh, like that's the freaking journey that we had getting to this cutscene. So well executed. I've really got to give it to the writers. Again, the design philosophy changes many times. So, okay, so whoever made the ending of the game, right, did a terrific job. And they again, it gets better when you're 20 hours into the game, bro, right? Like that kind of bull crap. It happened here. It's so weird. I didn't expect that to happen. And so I really have to give it to this game. You know, it convinced me to fall in love with its world, with its characters. I never played Final Fantasy 1. I have no clue, like, really what all these characters are, right? There's this Princess Mia or Maya girl. I don't know what the frick she is. I don't know why she's in the game. I don't know who she is in Final Fantasy, the first Final Fantasy game. I have no clue if she's, like, older than, and, like, so, like, for players who experienced the first Final Fantasy, I don't know what this game's like for them. I don't know if they're like, wow, like, this really expands on the first Final Fantasy game. I don't know how they register with this game. For me, I just know, like, going in blind with this story. I love the characters. The women are effeminate, and it's amazing for the most part. Some of them are feminist, but even the feminist ones, the majority of their character is effeminate. And the men, of course, they're masculine, and they're unapologetically masculine. By the end, I just have a lot of love for this game that I didn't expect to have. You know, I was expecting to kind of end this with a lot of meh, I don't really care, but it got me to really give a crap, and that is hard to do, man. Got to give it up to the freaking whoever designed the ending of the game. They earned their freaking paycheck, bro. I will say though, and this is something that you sometimes you got to ask this question. It's like, how much of oh man, and before I make this point, the end of the game has a freaking copyright song. Thank you very much. For me as a freaking recording, right, on this game when I was playing through it. But the emotional execution of the end song and the scene that plays at the end of the game. And I didn't even play the first game. It was like, I felt the delivery, right? Like, it got to me, the end of the game. It's a wonderful note to end on with the ending. And again, so bittersweet. Golly, it's so good. It's, man, I could almost have like maybe a mini video about the ending of the game. It just like its emotional delivery that it delivers to you. It's really good. You do have to ask the question. Final Fantasy games, especially their endings, especially the way that they kind of, you notice that they give certain executions. It does look like by this point that Final Fantasy probably has a design kind of philosophy that they create a lot of tropes with, right? Like they kind of have this, let's say this game design recipe. And sometimes you do got to ask the question, like, is there just a certain crutch that these developers have? Like, let's end a story this way. Let's give a certain emotional execution this way. And we know it's going to land, right? I think they kind of have a little bit of a crutch. There's a certain way that they like to do things. It works, but it's like, at what point do they start to overuse it, and do they start to cheapen their deliveries? I don't know. I don't know what I can say about that just yet. But again, the game ends great, but there are elements of other games that I can see in this game. Like I can see elements of like characters from Final Fantasy 15. I see elements of Final Fantasy 15 in this game, and it's kind of jarring when you're playing. You're like, man, that really seems like, and I can see like, this game was probably in development, or specifically, right? Because Tetsuya Nomura, right? He worked on Final Fantasy 15. There's no doubt in my mind that this game was probably delayed. It's probably being worked on somewhere around 2010, before 2010. They changed directors somewhere around that time. And my guess is that what happened is that they put it on hold. They were working on Final Fantasy 15, which was also going through development hell. And then Tetsuya Nomura, right, he picks up Final Fantasy 15. He's finishing up that game, getting it shipped out. And then he probably picked up this game, right? And that's why the ending of this game, like, there's a complete tonal shift. Certain characters get backstories that they didn't have before. And again, the whole story just changes at the end. There's almost no doubt in my mind he picks up the game, he fleshes out the story, and he finishes it off so that they can ship it out, and now we get the final product, right? From my position, that's what I see. That I think that's what happened. Just because, like, playing through the game, that's what it feels like. And there's a lot of beats that you see from Final Fantasy 15 that you see in this game. There's certain characterizations of certain characters, their personalities, that you see from Final Fantasy 15 that you then see in this game. There's certain elements of kind of the storyline or the storytelling that you can sort of see from Final Fantasy 15 to this game. And maybe also a little bit of elements, maybe too, from Final Fantasy 7 Remake. Because like all these games are kind of overlapping their development processes, and you have some of the same people working on these games. So it's not too confusing as to like why or how we see a game that seems to have a lot of other games in that game, right? So that's the story overall. Like that's pretty much my freaking comprehensive thoughts about it. And dude, it takes you for a freaking journey. You know, you don't expect the game to end where it does, and it takes you for a freaking loop. That's a huge element of the game. If you're buying this game, it is definitely worth it for the gameplay. The gameplay's fun. I'm not going to say it's like legendary or anything, but it's fun. And you will have a good time. You can play with 2 other friends, and the co-op is also pretty fun. It's definitely better than your AI companions. I will say that. Yeah, so if you're picking this up for the gameplay, it's worth it. For the story, after everything I just said, I would say that definitely. I think the story is definitely worth it. Of course, you're going to be playing a lot of the game before you get to the good stuff, so take that for what you will. Yeah, the freaking ending of the game, though. I mean, it freaking got me, you know? And I guess, so let's get into, though, the gameplay, right? So you get these jobs throughout the game. For one, you get a certain list of you get one gun class in the game. I think that's with the DLC. But you get a lot of swords, and you get a lot of melee weapons that you can use. You get knuckles, you get a staff that kind of has this hook tip to itself that can like disattach, and it's kind of like a whip staff, I guess. That's the best way you can call it. It's a whip staff. It's alright. You don't see a lot of people using the whip staff in this game, and honestly, it doesn't seem to be one of the better weapons, but whatever. It's in the game. You have knuckles, you have great swords, you have swords and shields, and you have, what else? You have lances. Not a lot of people use the lance. You have, what if I'm forgetting anything? You have maces in the game. People kind of have to use it just by default if you want to use a magical class. But, mace classes aren't really that impressive. A lot of people use the greatsword. But you also have daggers. Again, you have the gun. You have a katana. I think that came with the DLC. I think that's it. There's some, and also there's move sets to all these weapons. You press right bumper if you're on controller. You press right bumper for light attacks, and depending on the amount of attacks within right bumper, so right 1 attack, 2 attacks, 3 attacks, throughout your attack chain, you can press right trigger, and you can unlock these special abilities that you use through generating MP through using your light attacks. You utilize these special abilities, and those special abilities, they're pretty interesting. They're obviously more powerful than your light attacks. And the overall combat design is pretty interesting, and there's good variety between all the weapons that you're using. And again, there's also magic, and there's certain different magical spells you can use. There's not crazy variability in the magic, but there's enough with all the weapons that are offered to you. Largely, it's pretty fun. The weapon diversity, as well as the weapon complexity, will definitely keep you engaged in the game, and the combat is interesting with the amount of weapon diversity and a move set, attack set diversity that you also have at your disposal. So the combat never really gets dull, right? Because there's always something that you can be using, something new that you can be utilizing as well. And obviously there's certain abilities that do a lot more damage and a lot more break damage than other attacks. And that's the thing too, is that in this game you have health and you have the break gauge, which is in a lot of Final Fantasy games, which of course you can break an enemy and then you can do a special attack on them when they're broken. It's basically a stagger meter. So the combat is mostly pretty fun, and for most part of the game you're going to be focusing on doing more damage to break damage and executing enemies that way for easy kills more than anything else, including bosses. Very few enemies you're actually going to be killing through HP. So overall, the combat, though, it's pretty engaging. I really can't say anything bad about it. There does come a point, though, in the game where you're doing too many of the executions, right? The cutscenes take too long, you're killing too many enemies, and you've seen the execution so many times. It's like, bro, I mean, you could literally just skip the execution cutscene. You know, it starts to overstay its welcome, and you just want to freaking slaughter enemies. So that is one gripe to have. But outside of that, the gameplay's fine, and it's fun. It'll definitely keep you engaged. There's not much more to say about that. It has all the complexity that needs to be there. And I think that's all I really need to say about it. The level design to this game, now I will say the level design is very 2010. Let's just be honest, it is a ton of rooms and hallways. That's what this level design largely is. There's some levels that have a little bit more complexity, a little bit more infrastructural complexity or kind of intrigue to their design. The levels are not really, but again, you can tell that there's a design difference in philosophy from the beginning, the middle, and the end. So some of the levels later into the game start to get a little bit more interesting. They're not crazily more interesting, they're just slightly more dynamic. It does get better the longer you play. This is the strangest game, bro. It's such a mixed bag of good, bad, mediocre, and great. It's all across the board, and that's why I call it kind of like an emotional roller coaster, because you're dealing with elements of crappy and good. Again, some of the downfalls of game design that we saw a lot in like 2010 era. You see it in this game, but then it starts to improve in certain areas. Later you go through it. You know, overwhelmingly, the level design, the world design, it's not that impressive. It's not that pretty, but it's pretty enough, right? There's certain areas that are prettier than others. But again, some of the world design is kind of weird. Again, it's very, there's just a certain weird kind of level design that you just saw a lot within the 2010 and before then era. I don't really know what that's about. Just flat world design, but you have some areas that are pretty, so take it for what you will. And again, the combat is just fun. It's engaging. You have a lot of diversity of what you can use, what you can work with. So that's all of that, I have to say. It gives you a very mixed bag about what you might think or feel about the gameplay. Outside of that, man, the gear system. I think at this point, I've gone through what's pretty much relevant to discuss about the game. Let's talk though about the gear. And this game does something terrible with the gear system that should not be in any game. It is terrible with any game that does this. And did I forget to mention, by the way, this game is very Dark Souls-esque in just its level design, right? You unlock shortcuts, you go through a level, you fight enemies. If you die, you don't have to collect really any souls or experience points. But if you die, you know, you respawn at these cube locations and you have to rerun through the level. Okay, so this is a very Souls-light kind of game. It's not exactly Souls-esque, but it takes elements from Souls games. So, and that part of the game, it's fine and I like it too. Let's get talking about the gear here, and I think this is the final thing I really can think of talking about. The gear, bro. Oh, actually, there's one thing we're going to discuss after the gear. It's going to be the DLC. Is it worth it? And I'll just get through that pretty quick. But the gear is so terrible that any game does this. You unlock, all throughout the game, you unlock the same gear multiple times. And the gear system in this game is the kind of gear system that is, you have the same type of helmet, but it has a gray version, a yellow version, a blue version, a purple version, a freaking turquoise version. Go down the list. There's all these different colors of variety in the different rarities in the same gear that you can get. It's terrible because for the majority of the game, you never feel like your build is your own. And you have this button that you can press for optimizing your gear. And when you optimize your gear, the game automatically equips the best gear with the best stats. You are going to be constantly collecting the same gear over and over and over again, and it's just going to have minimally better stats on it. Oh, 5 more attack points. Oh, 5 more this, 5 more that. Sometimes it is a downgrade because certain bonuses and add-ons to the gear, but overwhelmingly the gear level is increased. And by the way, in order to get better gear levels on your loot drops, you have to constantly increase your gear level. So you're playing through the majority of this game until the end game DLC. You don't have any ownership over your build. And why is that? Unless you want your build to be very expensive and you have to grind to maintain the same freaking crap. But then if you're just maintaining the same gear all throughout the game and you're constantly having to afford to upgrade it, man, I mean, I didn't bother doing that, but there's no doubt you're going to have to be grinding a lot and you're going to be wasting a bunch of resources the entire game. And anyways, like what you're doing with this kind of game design is that you are training your player to accustom themselves to just, okay, I got new gear, auto equip it, fine, whatever, right? Terrible game design. You never feel attached to any of your gear, so you never make a build, by the way. You just go through this game basically flying by the seat of your pants, right? It's like, well, this is the gear the game gave me, so whatever the gear is that the game gave me, I guess I'm going to use it. So you never have any ownership over your gear, and you never have any ownership by pretty much default over your build design. You're just doing kind of like whatever the game wants you to do. And if you're not doing whatever the game wants you to do, you're just picking up whatever the heck seems to work best. So that is a huge gripe to have, because I would have liked it if I had gear that meant more, right? Gear that had more depth and that whatever I invest into my gear, I keep that investment. I'm just simply, right, I'm getting certain upgrades into my gear, I'm upgrading the level of my gear, right? I'm keeping the same piece of gear, and it's for a specific build I have in mind as I'm playing the game, but I'm just upgrading that piece of gear, making it better, and making it give me better stats. That's a way better design philosophy than I'm just going to collect the same piece of gear. And this is what happens: loot fatigue. This is one of those games that gives you loot fatigue. You're going to get tired constantly. How many times you just collect the same pieces of gear? It's going to get to you, bro. And again, you're not going to bother working through your build. And by the way, the second you do start working on your build, right, the second you do have any autonomy over your build design, guess what happens? It's going to take freaking hours for you to sort through gear, because the menu system is terrible, by the way. And the way that you go through it, it's so time consuming, it's so exhaustive. There's so many things that you're gonna have to be reading through and making sense of. Is that best? Is that worse? If you autistically love the details of designing a build, okay, sure, I guess, but I'm just gonna be honest with you, bro. Again, there's very few viable builds in this game, so you're gonna be sitting through and you're just gonna be like, none of these options matter, and none of it's, you're not gonna care about any of it because there's nothing to care about. There's really there is no real build diversity because there's only so many builds you can actually make. That is another issue. It's pretty linear, the builds that you can make that are viable, that will actually get you through the difficulties, and the better gear that awaits behind the different difficulties. And by the way, I believe there's 6 difficulties in this game, and with the DLC they added 2 of those 4 difficulties, as far as I understand. I think I'm correct on that. It's either 5 or 6 difficulties. The last one is Lufenia difficulty, and that's with the last DLC. So that's just my huge gripe. Like, the gear system's terrible. Games that do this, it just causes loot fatigue. You need to create a loot system where you collect one piece of gear, and that's going to sit with you for the rest of the game, right? And you can upgrade that piece of gear. You can do things to make the piece of gear better. I think Final Fantasy VII Remake did this, and I think it actually did the gear system pretty well, because you unlock specific unique pieces of gear and you do things to make them better, and you unlock things, right, different materia, different I think certain add-ons and bonuses to make your attack abilities and whatnot better. That's way better than this game and what it does with its gear. And by the way, Diablo does the same loot system. It's terrible. It's exhaustive and it's time consuming. It's like, bro, I have better things to do with my time than sorting through gear in a game that I'm going to replace in the next literal 5 minutes. You're gonna have me spend 15 minutes trying to sort through my gear, min-max myself, right? I'm acting like my gear matters, and then in the next 5 minutes I'm having to look at another piece of gear and determine, should I switch my current gear for that gear? They should not have done it. What a bad idea that it was. Again, games like Dark Souls, Elden Ring, whatever, they have superior loot systems, right? You get one piece of gear and you can unlock that piece of gear. The only downfall with those games is if they don't give you enough materials to upgrade gear with. That's one of the issues too, is like, if there's not enough ways that you can grind to upgrade that gear, then you really don't have that much gear in the game to begin with, right? If I play through an entire game, and that's the issue with these games, if I play through your entire game and I can only really unlock 2 to 3 pieces of gear fully to, so that I can actually get through the game, then there's a huge problem there, because effectively I only have 3 pieces of gear in a game that has like 50 pieces. So you do need to have enough resources to upgrade this stuff. One of the things that this game does do is that it does give you enough resources, overwhelmingly, especially with the DLCs. It gives you enough resources to upgrade your gear. So that much I do have to give to this game. It's like, okay, even though you're getting a ton of loot, there really isn't too many issues with grinding for the currencies in this game, and or whatever else, whatever materials that you can get. There really isn't much of an issue with having materials in this game. And quite honestly, I've gotten to end game at this point. I'm starting to get capped out on resources to upgrade with. Not all of them. There's certain ones that you're going to run out more than others, but the resources aren't as big of an issue as it is in other games. I think one game that had a huge issue with resources, it's going to skip my mind right now. I think Liza P? I don't remember. Anyways, let's just forget that. Let's start talking about the DLC here though. So is the DLC worth it, right? So okay, we went through the game, right? I will tell you, bro, in my honest estimation, this game's worth it. Gameplay's worth it. Story's really well worth it at the end. It's going to get to you, and it's going to create some huge emotional investments for you. And Princess Sarah, frick, that is the hottest chick in gaming. What the frick, bro? So anyways, aside of that, I would say that the game's worth it. The base game's worth it. And there's a lot of replayability, by the way. You have builds that you can maximize, and the game is fun enough to replay through. But of course, you're going to be replaying the game a lot more, if I'm being honest, if you play through the DLCs. So, and so we're going to get into the DLCs, should you get the DLCs. I mean, if you want to replay this game, absolutely get the DLCs. You're going to be replaying this game a ton by playing the DLCs, because there's just going to be a bunch of bonus levels that they have you play through. If you're interested in replaying this game after finishing it, definitely get the DLCs. The DLCs, by the way, $15. So it's really well worth it. It gives you 3 DLCs, progressively making the game more difficult, adding more content, adding new cutscenes as well. It expands on the ending of the game. Again, does not involve Princess Sarah. Freaking sucks. I don't know why they didn't involve Princess Sarah, but okay. Again, like, dude, she's a freaking what? She's the freaking chick that Jack risks it all for, right? She's the kind of girl that makes you risk it all. That's freaking Princess Sarah. And for some reason, they barely incorporate her into the ending of the base game and the DLCs. I don't know what that's about. It freaking pisses me off. Outside of that, bro, you know, the DLCs, they add new content, right? They add, I think I'm forgetting another class, but specifically what they add a couple of new classes. Something I forgot to mention is that you pick up all these different jobs, and they have their different upgrade paths, and so you get different stats with them, you get different abilities with them, and maxing out a job and unlocking its abilities allows you to use those abilities in future jobs that you're going to use, and you level them all up just so that you can, you know, get better stats within the job, and so that you can use that job's abilities in other jobs. You're going to get a couple of new jobs with the DLCs, so you get some more build diversity that you can work with. There is one DLC, I think it's DLC 2. You do unlock a class that allows you to play as Bahamut, which is pretty cool. So you get to be Bahamut, and you get to, you get to freaking clap cheeks, bro. It's a cool class. I haven't gotten to play enough with it, but for how much I did play with it, it was fun. End game, it's kind of difficult to make some viable builds. So like with the Bahamut builds, having an end game build for Bahamut's kind of difficult, and that kind of sucks. But you can kind of roughly figure it out and find a build with Bahamut that will work. But he's tons of fun. If you can get to a point where he's viable to play, tons of fun. So anyways, I think the biggest issue with Bahamut is he viable against bosses? I think if you're playing through like waves of enemies, you're going to be fine playing as Bahamut. It's when he's against bosses. You have to have a build where he kills the boss in like literally 3 seconds, or else you're going to die playing as Bahamut. So that's the only issue there. Again, there's viable builds with Bahamut. It's just a little bit more difficult to make viable for the entire game and all of its content. But the DLCs, man, $15, very well worth it. Adds new cutscenes, new classes to play as, adds new abilities, a few new abilities, and I believe it adds in the 2 weapon types, the katana and the gun. By the way, I forgot to mention this all throughout this freaking review. The gun, bro. The gun is freaking... It's... When you're playing through the base game, the gun is basically easy mode. If you want to get through the base game really fast, use the gun. Makes everything easy. It makes the entire game trivial. If you make a build where you can get a good amount of mana, and you use chain shot, use the ability chain shot wherever you can find it. Use the ability chain shot. It stacks 3 times. If you shoot it 3 times onto an enemy, you get a bunch of stagger damage off, and also health damage, but it just allows you to freaking melt bosses early game. So if you want to play through this game, you want to have a really easy time, just pick up the gun and you can rush right to the DLCs, if I'm being honest. It's easy mode. Late game, the gun isn't as good, but there's some builds, bro, that the gun is still overpowered, and you can freaking kill a high level boss. Like late game, you can kill a really tanky boss, and like I've seen, and I don't have this build, but you can kill a really tanky boss in like literally 5 seconds. So yeah, and by the way, the katana, that is fun. The katana is fun to play as. It has some interesting abilities. It's definitely one of the more powerful of the melee variants. I would say that the greatsword and the katana are probably the most powerful melee weapons. I don't know if there's any others that are really powerful, but those are 2 of the most powerful ones that a lot of people use. And the katana has some really stylish and good looking abilities too to use. And I guess to add some detail, so I kind of forget, let's be honest, a little bit about the separate 3 DLCs, right? Like which one's exactly which, but there are 3 DLCs, right? They do add new difficulty modes. In Endgame, there is Bahamut difficulty, Gilgamesh difficulty, and then there's Lufenia difficulty. So by the way, that makes 3 total difficulties, I believe, in the game. Or maybe it's 7. It's it's action, it's normal, it's hard, then it's chaos, so that's 4, right? Then it's Bahamut, I believe, then it's Gilgamesh, and then it's Lufenia. So I guess there's 7. Anyway, so there's a bunch of difficulty modes, and by the way, I have issues with a bunch of difficulty modes in games, but whatever. As you progress through these DLCs though, right, you have these Trials of Bahamut in DLC, I believe 1. I think it's DLC 1. Okay, you know what? Who cares? Anyways, the DLCs. You're spending $15 for all the DLCs. There's 3 DLCs. I don't know which one's which. I know that there is DLC 1, which is Bahamut. It unlocks the Trials of Bahamut, which just makes the same levels that you're replaying through in the game, the base game. It adds a few new missions, a few Bahamut missions. You do sit around and talk with Bahamut, which is some of the most meaningless dialogue I would say in the game. Like, sure, it's Bahamut and that's cool and all, but really it doesn't mean anything. And Bahamut really isn't. I don't know who the heck wrote Bahamut, but he wasn't really impressive. He doesn't really speak like Bahamut, but whatever. You speak with him though, it expands a little bit on the ending of the game's story. It adds a little bit more context and lore to Jack Garland and his character and him embodying chaos. So that's interesting about the DLC and the game. Yeah, it just adds a little bit of extra content for you to play through. It increases your level, your character's level, I think it increases your job limits as well. And so, you know, all your gear just gets better and you can just grind more for the same freaking gear, right? So that's what you get there. In DLC 2, and I guess also 3, is the Rift. It introduces the Rift, it introduces Gilgamesh, it introduces all of these, basically, like, so what is the Labyrinth? So for one, it introduces Gilgamesh, who's just this new boss that you get to fight. And I forget who he is in Final Fantasy, I have no idea, but he means something in Final Fantasy, I don't know what. But anyways, Gilgamesh. He's a new boss that you'll just fight over and over again, and there's some other bosses that you fight too. But the Labyrinth is just basically, it's like a roguelite kind of esque game mode where you progress through these floors. They get progressively difficult, you get better gear, you can upgrade your jobs even more, and they have different variables. Not that many, but they have a couple of variables. And there is defeat a boss, defeat a chaos monster, defeat all enemies, which is basically a horde mode. So that's pretty much perfect if you want to play like a Bahamut build. There is defeat all bosses, where you can fight a row of 3 bosses, or if it's really difficult, you can fight 10 bosses in a row. And if you lose, you know, you will progress in floors. You can unlock these monsters that you can summon with bells, which basically is just an ability. It's just an ability monster, or it's a monster ability. What you basically do is you summon the monster, it does a certain attack. That's it. It really does suck. I wish the summon monster bells would actually summon the monster to fight alongside you. And it just, like, I don't know, it added buffs, or it added status effects against the enemies, or it's not like it would be that overpowered to have around. And it could also attack, and it's not like your AI companions are very overpowered in this game either, by the way. In Endgame, they pretty much die all the time. There's really no reason to have the AI companions besides having a Liberator build where you get a portion of their stats. Their stats become your stats. That's the only reason that you would use them, if we're being honest. But outside of that, the Labyrinth mode, it is interesting, it is fun. It does add more spice and flavor to the gameplay loop of Final Fantasy Origins, and it keeps you in the game, right? And it does add more cutscenes, it adds more context to some of the world, and it just fleshes out more of Jack's character. Jack interacts with Gilgamesh, and some of the elements of like story that they tell through it. It's interesting enough. It's worth the price that for $15, it adds a bunch of content. And then, by the way, I think a part of DLC 3, it extends everything that you get within the Rift, which is also called the Labyrinth, I believe. It's called the Rift, Labyrinth. Everything that you get through the Rift, right? Once you progress a certain way through the Rift, you then get to unlock, what is it? It's a specific mission that unlocks a new area. And that new area is basically the Lufenian people, which there is no depth given to the Lufenians and who the heck they are. So this DLC actually goes a little bit more into them, kind of fleshes them out a little bit, and you do interact with them. There's certain bosses, certain enemies that you meet and you fight that I don't don't know who the heck they are. Okay, listen. I'm just gonna say this. I don't know if this is spoilers. I have no freaking clue who this guy is. The Emperor. I don't know who this guy is. Whoever the Emperor is, he shows up and you fight the Emperor. I don't know who you are, bro. I have no idea. I don't know why he's there. That's all I can say to you about him. You fight him. He has this big deal about like wanting to conquer the world or whatever. And that's it. I have no idea who this guy is. Maybe he's an Easter egg character because he literally doesn't matter. But you actually get to know who are the Lufenians. Where the heck do they live? I'm going to be honest. The Lufenians are supposed to be the villain. I think they're actually the good guy because they want to create a utopia and they have all the means to do so. And they want to eradicate chaos. At least I think so. Anyways, there's a bunch of elements to go into, like exactly what. Man, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of elements in the story that changes around the Lufenians. There's just so many circumstances that surrounds the Lufenians. I just don't know what to tell you about it. It's like, what do they mean? Are they the good guy? Are they the bad guy? I don't know. If I'm being completely honest, I have no idea because some part of it, right, is like what they're doing with Jack. A little bit of the story here. What they're doing with Jack is that he kind of lives, dude. Okay, and this is one of my criticisms with the game is that you have to fill in a lot of the blocks that they just, there's plot holes, bro. And there's things that you have to fill in. You have to do some of the writing for the writers because there's certain things they just don't explain. They don't go into detail about. You don't understand. And it's like, that is a huge downfall of some of the writing there. I mean, I don't know what the Lufenians really are about. I don't know why they have Jack fighting chaos in a circular loop. He lives the same existence time and time again, fighting chaos over and over. And that's part of the reason why he becomes chaos is because he wants to become this unpredictable element that can defeat and destroy the Lufenians, who are basically the idea of the Lufenians is that they are the embodiment of order. But I guess my headcanon that I had to write for myself, the writers, they don't do any feasible explanations for this crap. So the best I can come up with is that the Lufenians use Jack as this vessel, this entity to defeat chaos in different timelines, so that in every shred of any amount of timelines that exists within life, within the worlds, Jack is there to destroy every single trace of chaos. No matter what kind of different timeline you can go down, right? All the variables of within time, all the variables within time that you can go down that creates all these multiverses or whatever, like all these separate timelines you can live through, all these different circumstances that can occur and happen. Jack is there to destroy chaos, kill chaos, so that there is no trace of chaos left. And what the Lufenians want to do is they want to create a utopia and also separate themselves from a world of chaos, which is the world that we live in, right? The mortal world. So they want to basically become gods, and they also want to become immortal and live in a utopia. But like technically, if you can create utopia, you're not the bad guy. It's like, okay, so you're trying to create the means to demolish chaos, to demolish entropy, which is death, which is all the tragedy that comes with death. You're there to bring an end to death, to bring an end to entropy. Technically, you're not the bad guy. Technically, you're not the villain. So I don't exactly understand how they're the villain in this game's story, but anyways, that's Jack's whole reason to become chaos, is to ultimately defeat them. And they are given more depth. They're expanded upon within the game, within DLC 3. And that much I appreciate, right? It's like, at least we know about the Lufenians. At least we have some understanding of who they are, what their whole deal is. And ultimately, right, you do fight the Lufenian, the remainder of the Lufenians. Again, a lot of it doesn't make sense. There's a bunch of plot holes that I have to criticize about it. Like, if they created Utopia, why are they getting overrun by a bunch of monsters? And I think in lore, they created monsters to overrun Lufenia because they needed like some embodiment of controlled chaos even within their utopia that they're trying to create within order. It doesn't make any sense. I don't understand it. The writers didn't do that great of a job explaining it, so that's all I have to say about that. But within the DLC, man, regardless, it adds more cutscenes. It does expand quite a bit upon the ending of the game that connects to the, I guess, beginning of Final Fantasy 1. And again, I don't know what it's like for someone that's played Final Fantasy 1, like how much this game will mean to you, but for me, going in blind, it was interesting. It meant something. Again, it pisses me off that they didn't do anything with Princess Sarah in the end. I don't know why, but okay. Screw me, right? Freaking screw my life. Is the DLC worth it? Bro, It's more than worth it. It's $15. They give you new cutscenes, new classes, a bunch more content to play through. If you enjoy playing through this game and you enjoy replaying the levels to get better gear and to maximize your gear, then it's absolutely worth it. Now, I will say this though, huge caveat, your gear's not going to matter until you get to the last DLC. So basically, once you get to the final DLC and you've gone through you've exhausted all the content, and now you're in the most replayable mode of the game, which is just playing through the Rift and getting through the highest levels of the Rift, that is when your gear matters the most. No, it's once you get to the Rift that your gear matters the most and that you can start really committing yourself to a good build. But until then, bro, it just doesn't matter because they don't give you the tools and they don't give you the best gear at your disposal until the end of the game. So perfecting your build does not matter really until DLC 2, which is the Rift, and like maybe a little bit of DLC 3. It depends on what order you play through. But anyways, that's kind of my criticism there, is that yes, there's all this extra content, but your build doesn't matter. And a bunch of the content is throwaway content because it's like, listen, I don't know what it was like for the people who originally played through this DLC before the later DLCs came out, but they grinded for a bunch of gear that they didn't keep. That's a huge issue, bro. In some part, it kind of wasted your time, you know? But regardless of all my criticisms, they add a lot of classes and they add enough content. $15, really well worth it. And they add more cutscenes and they expand upon, in each DLC, they expand upon Jack. They expand upon his resolution to become Chaos and to fight the Lufenians. They expand on all of that throughout all the DLCs. So you get more story content, you get more of everything. So overall, is this entire game worth your money, right? If you buy all the DLC with the base game, is it worth your money? Yes, absolutely. This is the weirdest game because I have a bunch of criticisms. There's a bunch of things that are not perfect about this game. There's a bunch of things I would say it's like, what the frick were you doing? This is something really to criticize here, blah, 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 right? And there's things I do take away from this game, but by the end of it, I have this insatiable feeling to just love this game. The story delivers in a way that just, especially in the modern age, we don't get games like this anymore, bro. This game does so much well and does so much right. I didn't expect myself to like this game. I didn't expect myself to fall in love with the characters, you know? Specifically Jack and specifically Sarah fell absolutely in love with their characters. And there's other characters I started to like a little bit more. Astos, I started to have a lot more endearment towards his character around the end. But regardless of the fact, dude, this game did leave an interesting impression on me. And I will say though, in ending with this game does commit one sin, and that is nihilism. This is a very nihilistic game. The story is very nihilistic. We've been getting way too much nihilistic stories lately. I've said this in a couple of my previous reviews. A bunch of games that are just nihilistic nowadays. It's one game after another. Nihilism, 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 nihilism. For whatever reason, we don't have characters anymore like Batman. We don't have characters like Superman. We don't have characters that are heroic and aspirational. And that alone for me, it's miserable. You know, like playing through these games and playing through how miserable a lot of the storylines are. This is a very existential story. It probes into your mind a lot of thoughts about death, about existentialism, about the meaning of your life, you know, and all of those sorts of things, you know, and to some extent the tragedy of life. And right, all the time you put into finding people that you love and meeting these people that you love and building these memories with people that you love, and then they're taken from you, right? And they're gone, and they're permanently gone, and they won't come back. There's just a lot of tragedy and nihilism, also nihilism about this story, because also you're reliving the same existence over and over. That's the issue with Jack. That's why he becomes Chaos, is to set everything on a perpetual timeline where once you die, you're dead, right? You don't come back and relive your life again and again and again and again, and seeing the people that you love dying again and again and again and again. He makes the resolution to go against his continual existence, become Chaos. And so there's just a lot of tragedy about the story, a lot of nihilism about the story that you're going through when you're playing this game. And you know, man, I'm so sick and tired of nihilism being in all of our stories. It's in every single one. I was talking about this in the playthrough, but this is absolutely the result of having no culture anymore, no nationality anymore. This is the result of modernism. And there's a bunch of things with modernism, of course, egalitarianism, wokeness, all these things, all these new age beliefs and methods of thought. This is what it brings to you, bro. And the best stories without a doubt. They always have a harbor, a vessel within traditionalism. We just don't see that, we just don't see that anymore with a lot of stories. It's so sad. It is the most depressing thing. You just have so many stories where like you loathe, like the whole premise and concept of the story is to loathe your existence in some fundamental aspect or form. I'm just gonna leave it there. There's a bunch more to say there. Maybe that should be a separate video. Right now it's not going to be a separate video, but that's my thoughts. When I finish Final Fantasy Origins, it's such a mixed bag. Bunch of things I have to criticize, bunch of things I don't like, bunch of things I love, bunch of things I endear, a bunch of things that redeem themselves. I have a lot of thoughts about this game. This is a lot of fun with friends, by the way, I'm sure, because it's a good game. And you can make different builds. If you play with friends, you can make there's a little bit more build variety and diversity that you can engage with, right? Because you can make a support build, and that can be helpful. And then you can, I think you can make a tanky build. I don't really know what the point of a tank build is if it takes forever to kill everything, but you can do that if you wanted to. Maybe if you're playing with friends, there's a benefit in it, right? You have one dedicated guy that can pick up the team. Throughout the game, that's gonna matter. Yeah, man, interesting game. Definitely it takes you for a ride, and that ride, it left an impression on me that I don't think I'm going to forget for quite a while. A lot of games, man, especially a lot of modern games, woke games, very easy and worthy of forgetting. No one talks about them after they're done, but this is a game that left a very weird impression on me. And so it offers something that a lot of modern games, they just don't provide. And that is with all of its glaring issues too. So anyways, thank you for joining me on this video. Thank you for getting this far, and I will catch you on the next video. Okay, so, by the way, we're just doing this jump cut right here. I forgot to mention this in the review, but something I wanted to mention. So, for one, I am very decisive in saying that there's a big part of me that loves this game. Okay, I love the story. And throughout the entire review, right, I'm trying to come down to like, what do I really think of this game? Is it really that great? What is it exactly in its quality, right? And a little bit mixed. And I have to say, just without a doubt, by the end of me thinking about this game, I love the game. I love this game. I love the story. I love the combat. It's just a very well made, above average game. That's what Final Fantasy Origin, right? That's what this game is. And here's the other thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention in the review. With Jack's character, bro, he's unapologetically masculine. This is the kind of character we don't get anymore nowadays, and he even does freaking hilarious stuff. Like, so, and like, this is the kind of crap that you just don't see, in any games. And jeez Louise, like the woke mob-ageddon always go out of their way just to clutch their pearls over anything. But right, so just forget those people, they're freaking losers. But bro, you have a moment in this game story where literally, Sarah is like, so okay, what's happening? The city of Cornelia is under attack by the monsters of chaos. Sarah sits there and she says, no, I'm not going to go. We're not going to run out of the city. I'm going to stay here and die, right, with the people of Cornelia, because, she wants to die with her people, and like she's getting overly sentimental about about the circumstances, right? It's like, I'm going to die with the ship or whatever. I'm not going to let these people die unless I die. And what Jack does, it's the most hilarious thing that happens in the game. He literally just punches her in the freaking stomach, bro. He punches her in the stomach. She knocks her unconscious by doing that. And then I think he tells somebody to just, go carry her out of the freaking kingdom while he clears a path for them to get out of the kingdom. It is the most hilarious thing. And that's just one element of how much I love Jack's character in this game. He is authentically masculine. Sarah just wouldn't shut up, and she was just going on and on about, oh my gosh, we can't leave, blah blah blah, and then he just literally punches her out of nowhere, complete left field. It was hilarious, and it was amazing, and it was so funny because, right, that was him on the spot just being like, no, time to be decisive, get the job done, you're not gonna freaking die here. And so he knocks her unconscious, punching her in the stomach. Ultimately, he keeps her from getting herself killed, is what that scene is. And it just stuff like that with this game, with Jack's character, is what really redeems this game and its entire story. And that's really, for me, like, why I just love Jack's character so much. Because he's not some freaking soy boy, feminist latte dude. And it's like, if a woman just won't shut the F up and she's creating a freaking problem for not only herself but everyone around her, he does what it takes to create a solution in that scenario. And it's freaking hilarious. Every single time throughout the game that Jack does these things, it's hilarious. And so, unapologetically masculine. And that, for just that alone, I love this game. And just when I think about why do I love this game so much, it's just Jack's character, bro. Like, and the story that he has, it's really the redemptive element of this game. So I wanted to just put that in here. And of course, I looked up a little bit at what the gaming journalists think. Yeah, and a lot of people, it's funny what the gaming journalists think, because they're all drinking their soy lattes as they're spurging out on their freaking soy. Yeah, they sat there and they said that Jack's character was hard to tolerate. Okay, he's the only good character in the game. And then they sat there and they said that he was an edgy protagonist. I'm face palming right now. An edgy protagonist. Like, this is the kind of world we live in now, especially with gaming journalists. And they see, this is the issue with gaming journalists. They're the reason why the gaming industry is dying right now and why it's losing money left and right. They're the reason why it's all woke. They're the reason why these developers think they need to listen to these freaking clowns, these degenerate loser scumbags sitting around with their little pencils stuck up their freaking rear end, telling you what's right or wrong, while they make their degenerate stories. They'll sit there and praise freaking bullcrap like Last of Us 2. Anyways, it's just. But if you put a genuinely, unapologetically masculine character within a game, they'll clutch their pearls and get upset about it. And that's what you see. That's what you see with this game. Bro, Jack's character is amazing. And just that example, Princess Sarah would not shut up. She's like, no, I'm going to go down with the ship that is the kingdom of Cornelia. And then Jack just punches her in the stomach. It is the most hilarious scene in the game. And for freaking, pearl clutching leftists, right? It's the most offensive crap that's out there for them. But again, it was the most pragmatic thing that Jack could have done in that situation. And he cut the BS and he was like, no, we're going to get out of here. You're not going to die. That kind of a character, you don't see it anymore in gaming. Instead, you get these lame, flat characters. Just think of a character like Cal Kestis, I think is his name, from Jedi Survivor. Jeez Louise, bro, that guy doesn't stand for anything. The guy literally, he just goes through the freaking ropes, right? It's just wherever the waves of the tides take him, he just goes. But he's not an interesting character, Cal Kestis, and he's lame. Interesting characters will offend you, and they will have convictions that will piss off certain people. And it's kind of funny, by the way, because I've seen some of what other people have said. As if I really give a crap what other people think, but it is just funny because you're always going to see this disparity between the critics, right? Air quotes, the critics, and their glaring freaking intelligence. Like, wow, what a gleaming example for civilization. Let's listen to the critics, which are just freaking degenerates with jobs, or right, degenerates with a freaking pen and paper or typewriter in hand, right? These freaking clowns who they're barely educated. They act like they're educated. They act like they offer any value to society. They don't. And they also are under the guise that they're intelligent because they have some faulty certification from somewhere that tells them you have good enough ideas to now spout your ideological nonsense and to start sharing your freaking leftism into the industry and tell everyone else how to live their lives while you yourself you have mental illness, you're not stable, you have a bunch of problems with yourself, but you are the person to tell people what to think and say. It's these freaking clowns that have destroyed the gaming industry. We need men back in the gaming industry. We also need men back in journalism. We need men back in everything. Everything has become so overly emotional and overly, let's clutch our pearls about this. Let's clutch our pearls about that. Let's act like everything is offensive and let's ultimately destroy anything that people actually want to engage with, which is what is the one thing people want to engage with when they're looking at a game? What is it? What is that one thing? Traditionalism. You look at any great franchise or property, it's traditionalism. It is the bare core root of what humanity is. Bare human psychology. That's what people love. Conan the Barbarian. Guess what? He's toxic and he's masculine for today's day and age. But guess what? Guess what? Guess what? Men and women, who cares what the women think, but women like it for their own reasons. And just to make that point, but again, what really matters is because it's this is the audience of Conan are men. Men and women, but specifically and most importantly men, love Conan the Barbarian. Why? He's a masculine male character, right? He's not a twink. He's not some SJW warrior. He's none of this freaking bullcrap. Men and women love Conan the Barbarian because he's just a freaking man, masculine, and no apologies for that. All right, that's what people love. And you look at Star Wars, and it's also a very traditional story. It's not about a super masculine guy. Luke Skywalker's not incredibly masculine, but he's going on a hero's journey, right? He's a man from a family, and he's trying to, basically reconvene with his true family, right? And it's a family story, ultimately. It's a space opera about a family. And there's none of this freaking woke bullcrap, right? There's no freaking gay people. There's no freaking, women are equal to men. There's none of this stupid horse crap that we are now being sold and having forced down our throats nowadays. What we get with great and Tolkien, right? Tolkien with Lord of the Rings, bro. That isn't freaking woke, okay? It's about men. Only men. Women are not warriors in Tolkien's world. It is men. And they're upholding their male burden of performance. They're upholding it and they're going out of their way. And what? They're fighting against the entity of evil, as far as they understand it, in the world, which is Sauron. And of course, it's going to come down to men to fight against, the legions of freaking orcs and evil. It's down to them. It's down to men, because we know women aren't going to do jack crap. They don't do jack crap in the modern age, in the modern world. They won't do jack crap for anything in a fantasy world. Again, storytelling is based in enlightenment. And enlightenment only comes from reality. And when you put delusion into your storytelling, you are enforcing what? Delusion, perversion, therefore malice, therefore evil. These are degenerates with jobs. Remember that with these freaking moronic gaming journalists. These are the people who have destroyed everything that people love about gaming. They've destroyed the entire industry. The industry is losing money. Tons of studios are going out of, business, and they're not making good games, and nobody wants to buy their games. Why? And it's so funny because people will sit there just so that they can look acceptable, socially acceptable, because people care more about optics and preconceptions rather than they do about convictions, about truth, and about honesty. People will say, for the sake of social preconception, oh yeah, I would love to see this, woke that. Oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with having strong women. There's nothing wrong with XYZ, all this freaking horse crap that no one buys, no one takes seriously, and that doesn't show itself anywhere in the real world. But the stories that so that's what people say they love, and then those games, by the way, that do all this woke stuff, they go broke, and no one remembers your story, no one cares about your story, it doesn't mean anything, and it does not capture the zeitgeist, which means what? It's futile, it's irrelevant. What do people love? What do people love? What is the one thing that people love that no woke head can convince you otherwise thereof? People love traditionalism. People love feminine women, masculine men. They love not woke, family dynamics. What they love are authentic, real, down-to-earth family dynamics, typically in the ideal, right? Where the even if you have a degenerate kid, they're the prodigal son. But ultimately, right? You have a good son, though, character like Luke Skywalker. That's a traditional character. You have Frodo, who is, he's not massively masculine, but he's a man becoming of a hero, right? In his own sense. But he is a traditional character. He's the unbecome man becoming. That's what makes so many stories great. And Galadriel, by the way, not a girl boss. She's an effeminate woman who just bestows gifts to the heroes. It's in their hands that they save the world. It's so simple, and people love traditional stories. And it's all this horse crap, this postmodernist horse crap being forced down our throats by people who act like they know better. And they are the people who have the most problems. They are the most degenerate of all people. They're the most misled of all people. They are the most angry, bitter, mentally ill people of all. And they're the ones who have the gall to tell you that they know better. They have the most problems of all. And they're there to correct you the most of all. Absolute degenerates with jobs is what these people are. So anyways, Jack is a great character, bro. He's a wonderful character, and he literally is the saving grace of this game. And did I forget to make this point? Anyways, this is the disparity that you see between journalists and actual real people. You look at what a lot of people say. I haven't looked at everybody. I don't care about everyone's opinion, but the people I've seen say they love Jack's character, that he's funny. I've seen a lot of people say this. Again, not as if I really give a crap about what other people think. I'm just saying, you have journalists saying one thing, and you have the audience saying another. Take that for what you will. The journalists did also say that, you know, there were issues with the level design, which, yeah, I think the level design is very lacking. It's not very inspired. It's not very creative, and it's also not very alluring. You think about a game like Sekiro. Think about a game like Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring. Even though, like, maybe I could nitpick a few things about those games, specifically Elden Ring, maybe incontestable level design. It's so good how FromSoft, they know how to make levels. And you look at a game like Sekiro, and has great level design. And the thing about level design is that you need to know how to make it not be flat, right? It can't be flat. It can't just be one-dimensional. But also, how do you make it beautiful? How do you make it grab the eye and be a spectacle while also having some practicality for gameplay? If you can really master these things, which certain developers do, you know, I would actually say that although a lot of things suck now with Assassin's Creed games and they're woke as freaking crap, they're great at world design, level design, I would argue. Maybe level design is a little bit of a different topic with them, but you look at like a game like Dark Souls 3, wonderful level design, very good. And a lot of games take after their level design, literally being directly inspired in certain games. So when you inspire other products, you're doing a good job, and it's because you did something right. And Dark Souls 3 did a great job. Elden Ring, although there's places I could nitpick, they did a great job in the end. And this game does lack on the level design, but the combat is engaging. It's enticing. There's a lot that you can work with. There's a lot of variability that you can utilize, and for that reason, therefore, it's good. And I did enjoy it. I wasn't bored playing the combat, and that's all that matters. Even if there's places to improve, it doesn't matter. It's like, as long as it's just bare minimum working, then you can just criticize it, say these are the ways that it can improve, and hopefully they improve it. This game was pretty good. And like, what was the rating I gave it? Because like now I'm like, this is like after the fact of me making the entire review, but what did I say? Oh man, this is kind of difficult to give a rating, isn't it? Because the story has a lot of pitfalls. Jack is the most redeeming character. Princess Sarah, love her character. Freaking hot, by the way, too. And what else? And the ending of the story really delivers home everything that they were building up. So I would have to say with this game, the story, I would give it an 8 out of 10. It's above average. There's a couple of things that they miss on it. It's either it's an 8 out of 10 or it's a 7 out of 10. It's really difficult to tell because like the delivery that they had at the end of the game was the story. Really, there's almost no story during the beginning, the middle of the game. If I had to judge the end of the game, for me, it was around an 8 territory or just a 7, right? It's somewhere above average. It's just tough because it's like, how do you... There's just elements, like what really mattered. Listen, I'm just going to say subjective. Let's not... Okay, so we're not doing objective here because being objective about it, I would really have to think about other games that I definitely... Okay, other games are very good and they definitely provide you the value that you're looking for. I would have to think back on those games, how well that they execute their elements compared to this game. So either this game is a 7 or it's an 8. But the fact that in my mind, I have to do a lot of the writing for the writers. And by the way, I did look up a little bit about the development for this game. So it is interesting. So Team Ninja co-directed this game, where Tetsuya Nomura, he came up with the original idea of the game. They didn't know if they wanted this to be a mainline product or not, but they really convinced Square Enix to make it a mainline product, this game. So, but you know, obviously a spin-off, but a part of the mainline series. So that was kind of interesting, and I guess ultimately they were kind of alongst the way of making this game. They were just having a hard time really determining. I swear this game was, the development definitely had to have started somewhere in 2009, 2010, but maybe it didn't. I don't know, but whatever it is, what else was it? Nomura also did some of the character designs, right? Or he overheaded it. So anyways, whatever it is, whoever worked on this, there was a lot of chefs in the kitchen. That was obvious. And throughout the game, you can just tell like the design philosophy changes. But regardless of the fact of all these things that you can say, again, this game is very flawed. It's such a mixture of bad and great. Story's great. I got to give it to the story. Like, it just really delivers on a lot of things. Maybe I should just say it's a 7, right? If it were an 8, it would be a much more comprehensive, cohesive story. And this story doesn't have a lot of cohesion, comprehension. There's a lot of things that you have to fill in the spots in the blanks for, right? A 9 story, I mean, that would be a story that gets the whole thing right along the way. It's comprehensive, it's cohesive, and it really delivers on all of its characters, not just one. This game only delivers on one character, so they only delivers on one. It's not comprehensive or cohesive, so that's pretty much 2 points. A 10 out of 10 would be like, the story provides some real enlightenment or some form of enamor for you as the audience. It offers something of raw value, and it's a classic, right? So it's breaking boundaries, it's freaking defining the field, is defining storytelling, right? And that this game doesn't do that. It doesn't define storytelling. It's not cohesive or comprehensive. There's only one redeeming character, that's Jack. So yeah, okay. You know what? Let's say that then the rating it's a 7. It's above average. But man, like for me, I experienced this in the end like it was an 8. That's kind of for me the subjective scoring there. Experienced it like an 8, but really in reality, it's a 7, right? It's above average. Way better than the woke crap that we're getting nowadays. Holy crap, I'll tell you. Oh, and by the way, all the woke garbage that we get nowadays, oh, the journalists, oh, do they love those games. Oh, do they give the best of ratings. Guys, oh, we don't have an edgy protagonist. God forbid we have an edgy protagonist. By the way, Jack is not edgy, but apparently being masculine is edgy. So here we are, guys. The modern age is beautiful and it's completely misled. And these are the same people who are destroying the country. But as they destroy the country, they're going to run away to the states that are edgy and toxic and delinquent and twisted and bent backwards. And oh, you know, we need to grow from here. I can't believe society is so regressive. Yeah, okay, then stay in your freaking blue states. Oh, that's right, they don't. So screw these journalists, screw these people. You don't know what you're talking about, and you're some piece of trash that's acting like you know better than people who are normal, and you hate masculinity, of course. And that doesn't go without saying. What's wrong with you? Why do you hate masculinity? But nah, whatever. Screw those people, man. Jeez Louise. Anytime I read these freaking journalists and whatever they think and say, it's most enraging stuff because it's children. You're reading children with jobs, degenerate children with jobs. And let's just face it, they've made a huge impact on the gaming industry. They've destroyed the gaming industry. They won many of the battles in the overall culture war, right, for gaming. They deserve nothing. They're worthy of nothing. Their voice and their opinion means absolutely nothing. They condemn everything that they themselves either are or worse than, right? It's just a political side of projection and gaslighting. But outside of that, it's amazing to me that we take these people seriously whatsoever, and it's amazing that they even have jobs. It's like, wow, you guys literally could not find normal people for your job. Like, how hard is it becoming? Just find normal people. That's a whole other conversation for another day. This game was great. The gameplay, I would say it wasn't, there's some elements maybe arguably a little bit rough. Yes, I'm not going to go into in-depth detail on this, but with the gameplay and the combat, there's definitely some rough edges with it. So the best I can say for this game, though, it's competent. It's competently made. It's decently fun. And because of that, I would also say that the gameplay is probably a 7 out of 10, right? Again, there's some rough, it's rough around the edges. There's some very unpolished elements to the gameplay that at times just makes it a little bit awkward to use, like the magic casting system. I'm not a big fan of. Like, magic casting really shouldn't be idle. Locking yourself in place like that, there's only certain ways that you can make idle standing casting interesting. It would be better if you had fluid casting, making magic more dynamic, almost like ranged melee, right? That would be kind of cool if they made a magic system like that. Again, this game isn't a mainline. It wasn't getting the most a Final Fantasy budget. It's really well made for what it was given as a budget. For not being a mainline series, this is very well made. All things put together, right? It's like I experienced the story like an 8. I enjoyed the gameplay as a 7, and I would say that the gameplay, it's either a 6 or a 7. And again, we're not going to go into an in-depth analysis of the combat, but I can see an argument for a 6 out of 10 gameplay and combat. Ultimately, though, it's passable. You experiencing it, it's not that bad. Those are my, after the matter of fact with this review, those are some of my thoughts, and I will catch you on the next video.